This patch of tropical forest protects one of the most endangered ecosystems on our planet. It could have been cleared for palm oil. Instead, huge multinational corporations have paid to safeguard it. It's called Rimba Raya, and it sits on the island of Borneo in Indonesia. The land traps and stores carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas that's fueling climate change. And it's an activity set to become increasingly lucrative.
This is an emerging asset class. It's an opportunity to exponentially grow the global economy based on the ever-increasing value of these natural capital assets.
And that means a fight over the spoils.
So what we have here is essentially a battle between companies and the Indonesian government, all fighting for a slice of the profits.
The fight over this protected jungle highlights one of the most pressing questions in the climate change battle. Who profits from saving the planet?
Rimba Raya is basically this stretch of forest about the size of Las Vegas that borders the Tanjung Puting National Park. And it is one of the biggest carbon offsets projects in the world.
Carbon credits are designed as a way for companies and countries to compensate for the emissions they produce. This could be mandatory, as required by law, or to meet the voluntary climate goals of corporations. Take Volkswagen, for example. Part of its sustainability campaign is to be carbon neutral by 2050. But that's not so easy, given that the carmaker emits almost 6 million tons of greenhouse gases a year to produce its cars. So to offset some of its pollution, VW buys credits from projects like Rimba Raya. The credits help fund the preservation of forests that otherwise would be at risk of destruction. This stops massive amounts of carbon dioxide from being released and compensates for or offsets Volkswagen's emissions generated elsewhere. In Rimba Raya's case, carbon credits fund the protection of its forests and peatlands that can store 8 times more CO2 than a typical rainforest of the same size. Its credits also pay for conservation efforts and community initiatives like this library and mobile clinic.
Let's see where I was there.
And what Rimba Raya did is nothing short of remarkable.
We had a list of things we wanted to prove when we created the Rimba Raya Biodiversity Reserve. And one was that we could achieve transformation sort of at scale exclusively through the monetization of those carbon assets.
Todd Lemons is co-founder of a company called Infinite Earth, which created Rimba Raya in Borneo.
The world-famous primatologist, Dr. Barute Galdikas, was located there. We went to her and explained what we wanted to do. The first response we got was, "I heard all about you carbon cowboys, I'm not interested."
Often called the Wild West of modern capitalism, carbon offsets have a checkered history. Eventually, Dr. Galdikas told Todd of an area slated for palm oil, a key ingredient in everything from lipstick to candy bars, and among Indonesia's most lucrative exports.
Todd and his business partner, Jim Volcanic, looked for local backers who could persuade the palm oil company to back down.
And this was how businessman Rusman Wijaya, who heads the local firm PT Rimba Raya Conservation, got involved.
This is a good project for humanity, for clean air of the world.
Rimba Raya is massive. More than 25 million tons of carbon dioxide by companies have been offset using Rimba Raya credits. So that's about just a little less than the amount of carbon emissions that London emits every year.
But carbon offsets have proven controversial.
If the idea that you can simply invest a little money and make your carbon footprint disappear sounds too good to be true, that's because it absolutely is.
Carbon offsets are seen by some as a way to delay meaningful climate action, so there have been reports of projects generating bogus carbon offsets.
Critics argue that companies can use offsets to claim that they're environmentally friendly without actually doing anything to pollute less. It's otherwise called greenwashing.
Public confidence and investor confidence in the integrity of those credits is under the spotlight, and that's a big risk and something we're trying to work our way through.
Still, this hasn't stopped the industry from growing as polluters try to meet their climate goals. The carbon offsets industry is worth about $1 to $2 billion today, and growth in prices could mean a market worth as much as $1 trillion by 2050, according to Bloomberg NEF estimates. That's made Wall Street and governments take notice. The Indonesian government was only getting roughly 10% of revenues from local carbon offset projects. It grew alarmed that foreign project developers would be the main beneficiaries of this boom.
Indonesia slammed on the brakes and said, wait a second, there's no policy around this and we have to figure that out.
So the government did two things. It banned sales of new carbon credits from 2021. And a few years later, it revoked Rimba Raya's license over what it said were violations of local regulations, something PT Rimba Raya Conservation denies.
Government intervention is one of the key risks for investors. Investors want to know what the rules of the games are.
On the ground, Rimba Raya's workers were fighting battles of their own.
Memang sangat luar biasa apinya. Nah, saat kita berjuang untuk menyelamatkan itu, di sisi lain kami lewat surat keputusan dari Kementerian Kehutanan itu izin kami dicabut. Bagaimana rasa sedih akibat rusaknya kawasan akibat api, tapi ini kami justru lebih sedih lagi.
More than 70% of the staff were laid off, with limited job options to fall back on.
Harapan dulu kan, masih ada setiap bulan gaji dari Rimba Raya. Tapi kan sekarang keluarga kami udah nggak ada gaji.
Rimba Raya has slashed more than 2/3 of its budget and only kept limited conservation efforts going.
Bibit tetap kita rawat. Dalam 1 bulan itu 2 kali kita tetap kita rawat. Karena bibit itu sudah sayang kan.
Indonesia has one of the world's largest rainforests and is already home to some of the biggest carbon offset projects. It's seen as having vast, untapped potential to generate billions of dollars in the sector. Developers of projects like Rimba Raya want to exploit that, and so too does Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto.
We are considered the lungs of the earth. Indonesia is open to optimize the prospects of 557 million tons of Indonesia's carbon credit.
I think they're leery of foreigners dictating to them what they do with their natural capital assets.
Due to the disputes, the villagers nearby have become more and more aware of how lucrative carbon markets are, and increasingly they do want more benefits from it.
So the key question is, who should profit from this expanding industry?
Everyone should profit from offsets, and that's the delicate balance, right?
We still need a lot of fund to develop things inside the Rimba Raya. We have to have a source of revenue so that we can develop the villages to be sustainable, give a better healthcare, education, revenue for the people.
And while that's being worked out, what's at stake?
Without people to do fire patrols and forest patrols, you do have illegal loggers that are coming back to the zone.
So the worst case scenario for Rimba Raya would be that the government still doesn't reach any clarity on carbon regulation. And if that happens, there'll be a point where we just don't have the bandwidth to continue the work in Rimba Raya.
Saya 100% saya sedih dan saya tidak bisa bikin apa-apa.
For Indonesia, the future of Rimba Raya and the development of the voluntary carbon markets is crucial. President Prabowo aims to use sales of credits to raise tens of billions of dollars in revenue to help meet climate commitments. Other countries with large offset potential, like Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Honduras, have similar ambitions.
So how the Indonesian government looks to tap its carbon resources as a valuable commodity will be watched and possibly followed by countries in other parts of the world.
There's optimism in the market after global rules were set during COP29 climate talks. But quality concerns remain. Stricter standards are being put in place to ensure offsets do what they claim to do. Because of worries about the sector's credibility, some companies, including Rimba Raya's former customers, are moving away from the use of offsets. But for those back in Rimba Raya, the priority is to protect the land.
Sebenarnya untuk penyelamatan lingkungan, saya tidak ingin membanggakan diri, tapi memang itu orang-orang yang terpanggil.
Kalau saya kemarin mau lamar lagi ke sawit, tapi masih berpikir, oh kalau saya ke sawit lagi sama aja kayak dulu gitu, nggak ada akan perubahan gitu.
Kalau saran saya bagi pemerintah Indonesia, ayo mari kita lihat bersama-sama. Kalau pesan saya itu, ayo mari kita lihat kita dalam satu komponen utama seperti sebuah ekosistem hutan harus saling terikat.